Story 1. When I was 16, I landed my first job and wanted to reward myself with a new gaming PC. I spent countless hours scouring Craigslist, looking for the best deal. My search was driven by the excitement of finally earning my own money and the desire to invest in something that would bring me hours of enjoyment. After several weeks of searching, I came across an ad that seemed too good to be true. It was for a 3-year-old Alienware PC with impressive specifications, listed at just $200. The ad mentioned that the owner had recently upgraded to a newer PC and no longer needed this one, but assured potential buyers that the computer was still in perfect working condition. The price was right, and the description seemed honest, so I decided to contact the seller. I sent an email to the seller, and he responded promptly. We exchanged several messages, and I learned that he was available to meet the following day. He suggested meeting at a grocery store parking lot at 8 p.m. The location was about 35 minutes away from my house, which felt a bit far, so I proposed meeting somewhere halfway to make the trip easier. However, the seller was insistent. He made a series of excuses about his busy schedule and how he couldn't drive far, insisting that if I wanted the PC, I would need to come to his chosen location. Although it was inconvenient, I was eager to get the PC and decided to stick with the original plan. The seller sent me a few videos showing the computer in action, which reassured me about its condition. He also promised that if there were any issues, he would offer a refund. With these reassurances, I felt more comfortable and prepared to follow through with the purchase. The next morning, I set off for the grocery store. The drive was uneventful until I reached the parking lot. To my surprise, the parking lot was nearly empty, with just a single truck parked at the far end. The grocery store's lights were off, indicating that it was closed. I had chosen this meeting place precisely because it was supposed to be a public and safe location, so finding the store dark and deserted was disconcerting. Despite my growing unease, I had already driven a considerable distance, so I decided to continue. I parked next to the truck and approached it. The man inside the truck leaned over, peering down at me through the window. He didn't greet me or smile. Instead, he scrutinized me with a cold, evaluating stare. It was an uncomfortable and unsettling experience. When the man stepped out of the truck, I noticed that he was older, probably in his late 40s or early 50s. His thinning brown hair and the way he carried himself made me feel uneasy. He walked around to the back of the truck and opened the door, revealing the PC on the seat. However, it was positioned on the far side of the truck, not the side closest to me. The man then motioned for me to climb into the truck to retrieve the computer. He kept one hand on the door and watched me intently, which made me feel increasingly uncomfortable. As I hesitated, my eyes caught a small but significant detail. The handle on the inside of the door he was holding open was missing. It didn't take a genius to figure out what might be going on. The missing handle was a clear sign that the truck could have been a trap. My heart raced as I realized the danger I might be in. I quickly took a step back and made a beeline for my car, not daring to look back. The man yelled after me, demanding that I come back, but I didn't stop. I jumped into my car and sped out of the parking lot, glancing in my rearview mirror to see the man scrambling back into his truck. Instead of following me, he drove off in the opposite direction. The realization that I had narrowly escaped a potentially dangerous situation hit me like a ton of bricks. If I had climbed into that truck, there was no doubt that the missing handle would have meant I was trapped with no way to escape. I had only his email address as a point of contact, which was useless for tracking him down. I reported the incident to the local police, but since the email address couldn't be traced, there wasn't much they could do. I felt frustrated and powerless, knowing that the man could still be out there, preying on unsuspecting buyers. Since the incident, I've checked Craigslist periodically, hoping to see the ad reposted so I could potentially alert authorities or catch him in the act. To my knowledge, the ad hasn't reappeared, but it's possible he's using a different alias or selling different items to continue his scams. This experience taught me a valuable lesson about online transactions and safety. While the thrill of finding a great deal can be tempting, it's crucial to stay vigilant and prioritize personal safety. Always meet in well-lit, public places, and if something feels off, trust your instincts and walk away. The risk of encountering someone with malicious intent is real, and being cautious can prevent dangerous situations. For anyone looking to buy or sell items online, my advice is to always err on the side of caution. Verify the legitimacy of the seller or buyer, meet in safe, public locations, and if anything feels amiss, don't hesitate to walk away. Your safety is worth more than any deal. Story 2. A Craigslist encounter. I had been on a hunt for a temporary place to live for a few months, and Craigslist seemed like the best option. With most conventional apartments demanding year-long leases, I hoped to find a more flexible arrangement. Craigslist was teeming with listings from private owners who were willing to rent out rooms or properties for shorter periods, often at lower rates and with room for negotiation. I had about a month to find something suitable and, after sifting through various options and viewing a few places, I encountered a string of disappointments as each potential rental fell through at the last minute. One evening, as I scrolled through the seemingly endless listings, I stumbled upon a new ad. It was for a room in a house about 20 minutes away from where I currently lived. The ad was posted by a 22-year-old guy, and the room looked decent enough in the photos. After a few days of texting back and forth, we arranged a time for me to visit and check out the room. The day of the visit, I drove to the neighborhood with a mix of hope and skepticism. As I approached the street, my optimism began to wane. The houses appeared rundown, with overgrown yards and clutters strewn about. It seemed like this was a neighborhood that had seen better days, possibly a reflection of its residents' financial struggles. I hoped the house I was going to see would stand out as a brighter exception. When I arrived and parked in the driveway, the house was exactly as dilapidated as the others on the street. Nevertheless, I resolved to give it a fair chance. I approached the front door and, finding the doorbell out of order, I knocked. I could hear heavy footsteps approaching from inside, and after an uncomfortably long pause of about 15 seconds, the door opened just a crack. I caught only a glimpse of the man's face as he asked for my name. Nervously, I introduced myself, and he swung the door open fully, welcoming me inside. He was tall, thin, and had shoulder-length hair with visible tattoos on his neck. Despite his claim of being 22, he looked significantly older, perhaps in his mid-30s or even older. As I stepped into the house, a sense of unease began to settle over me. The man led me through the hallway at an unnervingly brisk pace, barely giving me a moment to take in my surroundings. He chatted incessantly, trying to keep up a facade of friendliness, but his rushed demeanor only heightened my discomfort. The kitchen, which we passed briefly, was in a state of disrepair. Some cabinets hung loosely from their hinges, and the overall impression was one of neglect and age. He barely paused there before moving on to the next hallway. The hallway had 2 doors, and he gestured to the first one, saying, "This will be your room." He seemed to be in a hurry to show me the space, as if he wanted to get the tour over with as quickly as possible. At this point, I finally had a moment to catch my breath and take stock of the situation. Something felt off about this whole encounter. I decided that, despite my growing unease, it was best to see the tour through to the end and then simply walk away. I stood there, hesitating for only a few seconds, when I noticed a sudden and dramatic shift in the man's demeanor. His face, previously friendly, darkened with anger, and his body language grew menacing. Without uttering a word, he began to advance toward me. I instinctively backed away, but he matched my pace and started moving quicker. Panic surged through me as I realized he was closing in on me with an intent that felt increasingly threatening. My heart raced, and I made a split-second decision to flee. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, my mind focused solely on escaping. As I burst through the front door and fled to my car, I heard the man slam the door shut behind me. I could barely believe what had just happened. I felt a surge of relief mixed with embarrassment and fear. I had been too naive to fully recognize the warning signs earlier, and now I was relieved to be safely out of the house. Once I was in my car, I took a moment to calm myself before driving away. The entire experience left me feeling shaken and foolish. Although nothing physically happened, the entire encounter was deeply unsettling. The man's abrupt shift in behavior and the general oddness of the situation pointed to a potentially dangerous outcome. That night, I resolved not to use Craigslist again. The thrill of finding a deal had led me into a situation that felt unsafe, and the discomfort lingered long after I had left. The house hunting process became a stark reminder of the importance of trusting one's instincts and the potential risks of taking chances with unfamiliar and unverified sources. The incident was a sobering lesson about the dangers that can lurk behind seemingly innocent opportunities and the importance of remaining vigilant in all situations. As I settled into the safety of my own home, I reflected on the day's events and felt a deep sense of gratitude for having escaped unharmed. It was an unsettling experience, but it also served as a valuable reminder to be cautious and perceptive, especially when navigating uncertain circumstances. Story 3: Living on the East Coast, where homesteads and off-grid cabins are commonplace, has its perks and challenges. Many people around here own large properties, often 40 acres or more, and it's typical to buy used tools and equipment from neighbors or locals. At the time, I was in the middle of a construction project on my property and needed a flatbed trailer for my truck to transport materials from the hardware store. New trailers were prohibitively expensive, but used ones were readily available due to the number of people in the area who owned them. I turned to Craigslist, my go-to resource for such finds. I found several listings for used flatbed trailers and sent out emails to the sellers. Only one responded, a man named Devon. We arranged a time for me to visit and check out his trailer. Given how routine this kind of transaction was in my area, I had no reason to be concerned. The drive to Devon's place took about an hour through mostly national forest roads. The driveway was a narrow gravel path winding through the woods. When I arrived, I was greeted by a small, weathered wooden cabin with a clearing in front. However, the flatbed trailer wasn't visible. It was a large item, so it wasn't something that could be easily hidden. I assumed it must be stored in a shed or garage behind the cabin. I parked on the grass and waited a few moments to see if Devon would come out to meet me. When no one appeared, I walked up to the porch and knocked on the door. The cabin's windows were covered with curtains, and the setting sun made it hard to see inside. After waiting a minute with no response, I started to feel uneasy. It seemed like no one was home. Just then, I received a text from Devon instructing me to go around the back of the cabin to find the trailer. I felt a twinge of discomfort but figured it might just be a case of the trailer being stored out of sight. I walked around the cabin's side and was met with more trees. There was no visible path or clearing leading to the back. It was just dense woods stretching as far as I could see. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I decided to head back to my truck. As I turned to walk away, I heard something behind me. I glanced over my shoulder but saw nothing. The sound resembled someone moving through the brush near the cabin's corner. My instincts kicked in, and I quickened my pace. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps crashing through the grass behind me. I spun around and saw a man charging toward me. Panic surged through me, and I sprinted back to my truck. I could only catch a brief glimpse of the man's face before I reached the safety of my vehicle. I quickly jumped into the truck and started it up, glancing back at the cabin. The man was no longer in sight. I didn't stop to find out if he had given up or if he had something else planned. My priority was to get out of there. I drove to the nearest town and contacted the local police. I reported what had happened and described the cabin and Devon. The police conducted an investigation and discovered that the state had no record of any cabin on that parcel of land. It was listed as an unoccupied lot. The cabin was clearly abandoned, and there was no indication that Devon was actually planning to sell me anything. The situation appeared to be a setup for some kind of harm. The police were concerned about the possibility of a dangerous individual using the cabin as a trap. They advised me to stay away from the area and reported the incident to local authorities to keep an eye out for suspicious activity. Reflecting on the experience, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I had trusted my instincts and avoided walking further into the woods, which likely kept me safe. The encounter was a stark reminder of the importance of staying alert and cautious, especially when dealing with unfamiliar situations. The experience left me shaken but also grateful for the quick thinking that helped me escape. It was a clear indication that not all transactions, even in a familiar environment, are as straightforward as they seem. As I moved forward with my project, I took extra precautions, always remembering the day I narrowly avoided a potentially dangerous situation.